So the rising sign, the first house, forms a very important relationship to the sixth house, which is, among other things, referred to as the house of health. It's also referred to as the house of servants or service. It's associated with Virgo by correspondence. The sixth house, in a lot of ways, has to do with, in a lot of ways, the sixth house has a lot to do with kind of the mundane reality, right? It has to do with kind of your just day-to-day life. It's the nitty-gritty details of your daily life. And has a lot to do with your work that you do, the work that you do every day. That's why it has a lot to do with skilled labor. It has a lot to do with apprenticeship, like learning from someone a skill that you do to do your work. Of course, it forms this interesting relationship in the Earth trine where, it feeds back to the second house in Taurus, which has a lot to do with your money, right? Your finances, your resources. A lot of second house like resources. And that also feeds into your 10th house, which has a lot to do more with your career, or like your greater works in kind of like the public eye. But the sixth house is like your skilled labor, which you do every day. Well, what determines your health in a lot of instances? That what you do every day. Your habits, your patterns, your rhythms, or lack of them is going to determine the state of your health. So the rising sign in the sixth house form what's called a quincunx, a 150-degree relationship between signs. And the way I was taught medical astrology, that 150-degree relationship is probably one of the most important medical aspects in a chart. Because what it does is it shows areas of weakness. So typically, kind of a simplified way of thinking about it is that the first house is your rising sign, your ascendant, okay? The nature of your ascendant, your constitution, tends to generate a particular weakness in the body, an area that you might be a little bit more prone to having some health problems. Maybe when you get sick, that's the area of the body that you get sick. It might lend insights into potential problems that you might face in the future might be revealed there in the sixth house. And so, but there's typically, if you're doing a whole sign house system, you're getting a very specific pattern there in terms of the relationship between the signs of the zodiac. So we were talking earlier about a Gemini rising. Well, if you were to apply 150 degrees. And a really simple way to do this is your quincunx signs are always the sign on either side of the opposite. So if you have Gemini, opposite Gemini is Sagittarius. Well, before Sagittarius is Scorpio, and after Sagittarius is Capricorn. So the two signs that quincunx Gemini are Capricorn and Scorpio. Scorpio would be, if you have Gemini rising, would be the sixth house ruler, the house of health. And that indicates kind of an area of weakness. Now, studying these patterns of relationship can be pretty interesting. You can glean a lot of insight as to the inner workings of the body in a lot of ways. So if we think of the Gemini constitution, might be more, typically is going to be more Vata in nature. Tall, thin, slender, cold, dry, tense, anxious, nervous. What's interesting here is that in Ayurveda, Vata governs the lungs and it governs the large intestine. Well, the quincunx, Gemini, rules the lungs and the respiratory tract. Scorpio, the 150-degree relationship, rules the colon. So that's a pretty interesting correlation there. And that kind of the way I understand this quincunx is that the anxiousness and nervousness and just excess energy of Gemini tends to lack rhythm. It lacks consistency. And it can tend to be anxious and nervous and therefore a little bit more sympathetic in its nervous system stimulation, right? Which is going to affect Detoxification. It's going to affect, because Scorpio is the quality of what removes things from the body. It's your detoxification system, basically. It is the organs that eliminate things from the body, the colon, the bladder, the pores of the skin. And so we might see with that Gemini type problems with elimination. There might be constipation. There might be the opposite of that, diarrhea, loose stools. There might be irritation of the bladder nerve, incontinence. There might be urinary difficulties, perhaps excess sweating, perhaps skin conditions like acne, things that affect the pores of the skin, right, due to elimination. So that's the Gemini Scorpio quincunx there. So this is a way of understanding the relationship between the constitution of the person and some of their potential, keyword potential, predispositions for disease, for just health problems that they might face in their daily life. And this is a really powerful pattern to study. Now, you can do a very similar thing with the sixth house that you do in the first house that I described. So first, you would just observe what is the sign of the a sixth house ruler. And then you would look at, okay, well, what are the areas of the body that sign governs? As I mentioned with Scorpio, the bowel, the bladder, the reproductive system too. There might be some libido issues actually there with that quincunx. The Gemini anxiousness can sometimes affect libido a little bit because Scorpio governs the genitals. So there's areas of the body. Also looking elementally, right? Is it Scorpio is a water sign. So maybe there's something going on with the water element to just look at. So you look at the sign ruling the sixth house. Now, more important, if you have a planet in that sixth house, that planet becomes much more important of a quality to consider, right? Which might trump the qualities and characteristics of that sign. If there is no planet in the sixth, again, you would look at what is the planet that rules the sixth house sign. So in this case with Scorpio, I would look to where Mars is located, which is the traditional ruler of Scorpio. Even though Pluto is the modern ruler, that doesn't change the fact that Mars still has tons of powerful correlations to Scorpio. And also on a side note, because Pluto is still relatively recently discovered, at least, in the timeline of astrology, it's pretty recent. We haven't really seen the entire rotation of that planet around the entire zodiac yet. So we're still learning about Pluto. And from a medical perspective, it's still kind of like being figured out, being understood. So I tend to rely on Mars a lot for Scorpio. But Pluto can be looked at as well. And that can give you more insights, right? Is the planet that rules the sixth house sign in a sign of detriment or weakness or fall? Is it in a sign of exaltation? Does it have all these harmonious trines and sextile aspects to it? Or is it being a little bit more challenged with squares and oppositions? These are all things to look at to give you a little bit more of a nuanced understanding of what's going on with the sixth house. So this is just a little bit of how to look at the constitutional pattern of a person utilizing their natal chart. This is just kind of like the first areas that you look at. There are lots of other things that can be going on in someone's chart that even trump the rising sign for the constitutional ruler. So I say start with the rising, but there are some other things that can be even more important. I would say top of the list there would be sometimes if there's a stellium, which to me is 5 or more planets in a single sign, that might trump the ascendant. Another would be stationary planets. So a stationary planet is when, planet's going forward and it's getting ready to go retrograde and it slows and then it stops, stationary, and then it goes retrograde, and then it slows and it stops. Now it's stationary, and then it goes direct. At either of those stationary periods, if someone's born with a planet that's stationary, it's like literally sitting there. Boof, it's really strong. And so that can sometimes be a constitutional ruler. And then the other one I would mention would be if there are a predominance of planets in any one particular element. So say you've got, 9 out of 10 planets in fire signs, but you've got Taurus rising. All those fire signs very well might become much more powerful for the constitutional ruler, just because that's a lot of fire, right? That's a lot of fire. So sometimes you can do that with the modes too. Say you have all cardinal signs or all mutable signs or all fixed signs. That can be contributing, but even that, the modes are very different because, you would think, for example, fixed, like the fixed mode, you think, oh, that's Kappa, kind of similar to Kappa. Fixed, it's inertia, it's kind of stable and solid. It has these Kappa qualities, but Aquarius is a fixed sign. Aquarius is not Kappa at all, right? It's very Vata, cold, dry, tense, thin, weak, deficient are very common qualities of people with strong Aquarian qualities. And I don't mean that as like an insult. It's just part of the nature. So the modes, I don't really think predominance of modes is as strong of an indicator, but a predominance of elements, if you've got all of your planets in earth, water, air, or fire, that's going to be a very strong constitutional indicator that might be more important than the rising sign. But nonetheless, the rising sign is very important because everything ultimately kind of in a way gets funneled through it in order to be expressed outwardly in the world.